I'm going through and reviewing every major chatbot out there, and today we're covering one that I haven't spent too much time in. But when I went to get into it and to review it, I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw, and that is Mistral's Le Chat, or just their own chatbot. So in this video, we'll cover all of the features that you get in Le Chat and talk about whether it's right for you. Now, please do note that this is a review of the chatbot itself, not necessarily the large language models or LLMs that are powering it. And as always, the LLMs change frequently, and they're often available elsewhere in other applications. So in other words, they are not what make the chatbot. That being said, Mistral is known to have pretty solid LLMs for the price, and they're often cited by many authors as being some of the best for writing not safe for work content. So if that's you, then you definitely want to give this a shot. But the models are also known to not be quite on the same level as some of the more mainstream models like those from OpenAI and Anthropic or Google. And I personally don't use them much because I don't have not safe for work content in my books, so I usually just stick with the more powerful models. However, Mistral models are also a lot cheaper on average to run, which factors into this review a little bit. So without further ado, let's get into the main features, the actual chatbot from Mistral, which is Mistral's Le Chat. They're a French company, so, that's why it's Le Chat. I'd like to start here by just taking a quick look at the pricing, because this is one of probably the biggest things it's got going for it right off the bat. That's going to maybe influence a lot of people to use it. There's a free tier like most chatbots have, a pro tier, which is $15 a month, which is a good 25% cheaper than pretty much every other chatbot out there. Most of them run about $20 a month. This one is $15. So if you're looking to save a little bit of money, this one might be a good one to go with. There's of course a team and an enterprise plan, but that's not going to apply to most of you. But what I really like is if you actually come down and look at the features that you get, you'll notice the free plan has pretty much everything that the paid plan does. You just get more of it on the paid plan. So if you find yourself getting throttled too much on the free plan, you're running into your limits and stuff like that, and you enjoy using the chatbot and you're using it pretty frequently, then you can update to the pro. But really, there's not much that you're not getting with the free plan. There is a limitation on libraries, which we'll take a look at, but you have the same number of connections. You have all of these features that you see here: messages, web searches, image generation, flash answers, verified news, agents, canvas mode, code interpreter, and document upload. You've got all of that. Chat sharing, customer service through the help center and knowledge base. There isn't chatbot customer service on the free plan, but I don't know how many people would actually use that. And then of course there's a couple of team and enterprise features that you won't get on either of those plans. But that's the basic rundown there. You pretty much get everything on the free plan, so you can start for free. In fact, I'd go so far as to say this might be the best free tier of a chatbot that you can get. I haven't tested it too much to really see how well it throttles you, but I haven't heard very many complaints and I haven't run into any barriers so far. And given the affordability of the Mistral models, I have a feeling that the free tier is likely to have a little bit more usage embedded in it compared to the free tiers of Claude or ChatGPT. So let's actually take a look at Le Chat. So this is what it looks like. Very standard chatbot. You've got your past chats over here. You've got your chat interface right here. Very simple, very clean. So let's look at the chat area first. Of course, you can type in your chat here as per any chatbot. Over here, you have a place where you can attach PDFs or images here, and it does do some basic analysis of those. Mistral does have reasoning models, so you are able to come over here and use the thinking models here and toggle that on and off. You can even do it at 10x the speed, but you'll notice here it says, since we're on the free plan right now, I'm not on the pro plan, I only get 3 of these in a day. So there is some throttling there. This is a more advanced feature, so it makes sense that it would be more throttled. You have that option there. Plus, you have options here for different tools. So first of all, you have Canvas. This is just being able to edit documents inside of a chatbot, which most of the AI tools have. It's not a feature I use particularly frequently, but you have the option. There is an image generation feature here, and as I understand it, the image generation engine that it's using is from Flux, which is a very solid source for image generation. They do, like, the Flux models are some of the best out there. You can also toggle on web search and code interpreter if you're into coding, and you have connections with with Gmail if you want it to be able to read your emails or connect with those, as well as Google Calendar to help it, manage your calendar and stuff like that. So it has a lot of these features are available on others. The only one that I would say is maybe a step above the rest would be the image generation, because it's using Flux. So for instance, I asked it to give me a photorealistic image of an alien visiting the Amazon rainforest, and this is what it gave me. Maybe not quite photorealistic. It looks a little bit rendered, but then I asked it to make it look like it was made with an iPhone camera, and it looked a little bit better here. I will also say it's pretty fast. Like if I go and say, okay, now make him a tourist visiting the Great Wall of China. And you can see just how quickly this image gets generated here. Oh, except I reached a maximum limit for image generation. So I guess there is a pretty strong throttle on image generation here, but you just take my word for it. These two images did get generated pretty quickly. Now, one thing I have noticed is that there's not really a way to change different models. Mistral, like any of the other companies out there, has multiple models that they use, and they're all going to be used here in some way. Like if I turn on Think here, that's going to be using a different model than if I were to turn it off. And if I'm, doing things like having it analyze images and things like that, that's going to be using different models as well. But there's not a way to switch between them and say, like, I actually want to use Mistral Medium instead of Mistral Large, etc. And so that's one thing that, if you look at the pricing, it's not really super apparent what models it has here. And I don't know if this is maybe just a feature of the free tier. I would say there's probably more of a chance that right now I'm just forced to use the cheapest and the fastest models that Mistral has available because I'm on a free tier. But I wouldn't be surprised if the paid tier allow you to take more beefier, more powerful models like Mistral Large and stuff like that. But right now, it doesn't seem to be a place where I can make those adjustments. So if that is a difference between the free and the paid tier, that's something I kind of wish that Mistral made upfront and obvious. But let's go through a few more of the other features that we have here in the chatbot. First, we have this one, agents. Now, when I saw this, I got a little bit excited at first because I thought, oh, agents, that's the big hot buzzword right now. But when I actually went to create an agent and take a look at how it is, I realized we've got instructions over here. We can add guardrails. We can adjust the tone. We want the output to look, and we can attach knowledge. So things like we can connect our Gmail or our Google Calendar, or we can just attach whatever documents we have. And we can also create a library here if we want to have access to that particular library. We'll get to libraries in a second. But what I noticed here is that this is essentially the same thing as creating a GPT or a project. It's very, very similar. So there's not really much to it that I would actually say is more on the side of an agent, an actual agent. They're just calling it an agent. But at least it does have the ability to create a GPT or project-like feature, because that's certainly, I would say, an essential feature of any chatbot at this stage. But let's look at libraries. This is one thing I think is actually a little bit innovative, and that is to create libraries, essential documents. Let's say you actually want to create multiple projects that have access to the same information. And the problem is you would normally have to upload those documents to each different, in this case, agent or project that you create. But in the case of Mistral, you can actually just create one library that has everything in it that you want it to have, and then you can plug that into any of your quote-unquote agents, right? And it would be great if Claude or ChatGPT had this feature, because I have a whole bunch of documents that I would love to just be able to upload them one time and then be able to use them in multiple different scenarios. But as it stands, we don't have that feature in those chatbots, but we do have it here, and I actually think it's a pretty cool feature. I'm hoping that we see something like that with other chatbots in the future. So that's really cool. There is a limit on the free plan to how much you can do here. If you go to the pro plan, you can upload us up to 15 gigabytes, which if you're doing mostly text stuff should be plenty. But yeah, so there are some limits here. It doesn't really say what the limit is for the free plan. I imagine if you're using just text documents, you can still probably get quite a bit in there, but that's just something to keep in mind. Then on the left here, we also have connections. We've kind of covered this already. You have access to Gmail or Google Calendar if you want it to understand, your email or your calendar to help you with various productivity tasks. Not something I particularly use a lot, but you do have those options there. And that's pretty much all we have here. So this is essentially it for the chatbot. Very similar to other chatbots. A few things that I really like more than others, like the libraries feature. I think that's really great. The agents feature is kind of disappointingly not that interesting. It's just essentially a GPT maker. You can attach files, all standard stuff. I do think the image generator is better than most because it's using Flux. And that's just my overall thoughts on this chatbot. Now, as with the other reviews I've done so far, I want to talk about the API. Because if we go to the API, and so this is where you can essentially get the same results almost precisely, but with a little bit more fine-tuned control. The only difference between accessing these models through Mistral's own API is the fact that you have to pay as you go rather than do it all for their $15 a month. And in most cases, I find that going pay as you go results in spending less than you would be spending month to month, as long as you're not really pushing the limits of these models and doing a whole lot, which you couldn't do with the paid plans anyway, because they would eventually throttle you because they don't want to lose money, right? So chances are you will save money by going through an API. And if we notice here, so this is Mistral's API. There's a similar one for OpenAI, for Claude, for Gemini, but you have access to pretty much everything. But here you'll notice we have access to all of the models, and there's quite a few of them, right? And we didn't have a way of changing these inside the chatbot, but here we can, and we can go to like a more powerful model like Mistral Large. We can go to some of the picture-based ones like Pixtral. We can, look at others, and there's just a lot of different options here. We also can go here and select temperature and the max tokens and the top P, all of which you can't do inside of the chatbot. Now, a lot of people don't really play with these too much, but temperature is definitely one that you should at least experiment with, I believe, because often you can get much better results by either raising or lowering the temperature for a specific task. For instance, editing often performs much better if you are lowering the temperature, because you get the AI to pay more attention to your prompt and actually stick to the prompt and not get too creative. Whereas if you're actually writing text, sometimes you want to raise the temperature because you want it to be more creative in those circumstances. So that's just some examples. You can add in this section called instructions. This is essentially the same as a system prompt. You give it a whole system prompt. And then, of course, you type your chat message here, and it also gets stored here in the history tab, so you won't lose your work. Additionally, you can create agents here. Same kind of idea. You just go to create a new agent and set up the instructions to do everything exactly like you would inside of the chat. The only thing I don't see here inside the API that I do see in the chat is a way to create those libraries. I don't see that. There's a tab here called datasets, but this is for creating fine-tuned models. I don't see currently a good way adding that. But you do have like code interpreter, image generation here, web search, premium web search, all of that is available here inside the API. So I've gone on record multiple times saying I think most authors, if you want to be a writer that uses AI, you should have a specialist tool that really specializes in the writing process and makes the workflow simple. So there are tools like that, like Novel Crafter, Sudowrite, Raptorwrite, Plot Drive, whatever it is. Have one of those, and then have a chatbot to be a sort of catch-all for everything else. And should that be Mistral? Well, I think as a free version, if you don't have the budget to pay for something, the free version is pretty good. It's definitely something to look at. I wouldn't use it for writing because the models that it uses are Mistral models, and they're okay for writing, but they don't quite measure up to the free versions of the other chatbots, or rather the large language models from Claude or Gemini, for example. But they're solid and they're more affordable. And that's the other thing, is that I think anytime you use some of these other models, it might be better to just go with the API, because if you're not going to be using it too frequently, you'll pay, maybe a couple cents here and there through using it when you do. And if we even go to pricing, and instead of looking at the chatbot pricing, we go to the API pricing, you'll see like standard Mistral Medium 3 model has a 40-cent cost for 1 million tokens of input and $2 cost for 1 million tokens of output, which is insane. I know Claude Sonnet is $15 for 1 million tokens of output. And keep in mind, 1 million tokens of output is roughly 750,000 words. That's several books in there, and it only costs $2. So it is a really, really cheap model to run. At least Mistral Medium is here. Obviously, some of the larger models will be a little bit bigger. For instance, Mistral Large has $2 for a million tokens of input and $6 for a million tokens of output. So it's 3 times as much, but still like less than half of what Claude Sonnet is. And still, like if you're paying $6 for 750,000 words, like that's a steal. Cost wise, if you're going through the API, you're going to be using almost nothing in terms of cost. Additionally, you can access all of the Mistral models here inside of OpenRouter. OpenRouter AI is one that I use quite frequently to test different models. And if I were to go to a chat, select add model here, and then just type in Mistral, you'll see I have access to all of the Mistral models here as well. These days though, if you had to pay for one chatbot, the one I'm recommending the most is actually Perplexity, because you get access to multiple models here. You can choose between a bunch of them. Notably, the Mistral models are not here. So if you like the Mistral models or need them for a specific use case, like writing not safe for work content, then I would probably just go and use either the free version of the chat or just use Mistral through the API or through OpenRouter. So because you don't have those models available here. Perplexity is primarily a search-based engine like a Google, but with AI. If you want to use it for writing and not for search, all you have to do is come to this little icon right here, click on it, and turn off web. And now you can use this just like any regular old chatbot with any of these models that it has access to. And it has all of the heavy hitters here. So those are just my thoughts on which chatbot to think through. Personally, I like the Mistral models. They're useful in certain situations, but I would pretty much only use them through an API or through OpenRouter.ai or a situation like that, because I don't use it enough to warrant using the paying $15 a month for the chatbot. And I don't think the chatbot adds enough to really warrant paying that extra price unless it's the only one that you're using and you really like it. There's nothing wrong with it per se. I just don't think it has quite the level that the other chatbots have, especially when you keep in mind that their models are a little bit weaker than some of the mainstream models out there. There may be situations where it works for you and it's what you need. If so, that's fine. You can at least experiment with the free version and see how well that does for you. Now, if this was interesting to you, my membership is open right now for enrollment. It won't be open for much longer. So if you want to get more access to me, I go live inside of the membership twice a week. We also have a guy who specializes in AI art. And I mentioned the Flux models. He's done a bunch of classes on the Flux models and how to get the most out of those. We have a developmental editor, which helps you identify what is good and bad writing with AI, as well as just giving you good information about what makes good storytelling, analyzing your first page and stuff like that. Plus, we have accountability calls every single week, twice a week actually, to make sure that you are hitting your goals, because that is my ultimate goal, is to get you to not only write your first book, but to write your next book and actually write 20 books or so within a short amount of time. So I want to get you to that point, because the more books you have, the better your chances of actually succeeding in this field. So if that's interesting to you, enrollment's open right now. You can go check it out in the link down below, and I will hopefully see you there.